Introduce yourself as far as who you are, what a little bit about your background. I think you're a very dynamic individual.
Aw.
Um, yes, you have a lot of that, a lot of experience, and kind of what led you to now, becoming a senior advisor and working in this space.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. My name's Jennifer, and about 15 years ago, I found myself in need of a quick job with lots of earning potential. So I found myself in the insurance industry, doing Medicare. And through the years, I've, added licenses, hopefully knowledge base, and met a lot of people in this industry, which I have grown to absolutely love. And it's definitely something that's very special to me. And another networking group, I met Mike Safi, who owns Silverlink Consulting. And as the actual compliance part of Medicare has changed drastically, particularly over the last 5 years, I still wanted to be in the senior space, but not necessarily in Medicare. So hopefully through the things that I've done over the last 15 years, I have a nice, well-rounded, basic understanding of the senior process, particularly when it comes to health insurance, and then also the overwhelming need for long-term care, and then how large that space has been. It's kind of like wedding dress shopping. 20 years ago, you had 5 choices. Now you have hundreds of
Yeah.
choices in wedding gowns. It's kind of the same thing in senior living. I'm sure all you gotta do is look around Jacksonville, and every other place is popping up a senior, living community of some sort. So what I do and what Silverlink does is, simplify that based on, what the needs are for the actual client, and then also what makes them happy. What do they like to do? Making sure that they're also socially stimulated, not just, safe. So
Mhm.
I found that to be a really great fun part of doing senior living placement is getting to know the client and then seeing them actually maybe being isolated before, now coming out socially. That also helps them physically, improve. So Mike said, "Why don't you come on?" And I've been now with him 11 months. And what we do is all of the work for the client and their family, and kind of congeal it into, 5 or 6 communities. And that way, it's not as overwhelming as trying to navigate 600 communities on your own.
Yes, well, that's thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important to really share your background because that was really what I loved when I met with you the first time, was really saying, "Oh my gosh, like it's so interesting over time how it's like building blocks, and working with someone like yourself, there's a lot of moving parts, in senior living. There's a lot of,
Yes.
cost and insurance and really to, have someone that can have a full dynamic of all of those backgrounds combined into one.
Yes.
So I was excited to have you on here
Thank
because
you.
we need to really understand what senior advisors do. What do you guys offer? So I think that'd probably be a great place to start is, what do senior advisors do? What is the service they provide?
So mainly, we're your personal assistant. So we sit down with you one-on-one with your family, get to know the patient, and then from there, really get down to what's important. And we're the middle person. So we deal with the communities and we deal with the clients, and instead of the communities and the clients dealing with each other.
What
That kind of makes it a little bit more personal. I think it helps ease a little bit of the anxiety, particularly for the families, that they're going to get a lot of phone calls, or, if they put their stuff out on the internet. I mean, I just met with a lady who put her stuff on the internet, and she gets 3 to 5 phone calls a day, and she can't get it to stop. So we're a place for you to come where we'll get a snapshot of what's going on. We can talk to their social workers or caseworkers if they happen to be in a short-term rehab, like Encompass or Reunion, or if they're an actual inpatient rehab, like a Brooks. and it's looking like they're going to be discharged and may not be, completely appropriate to go home, but, what are your options? We kind of take the 911 out of it, is the easiest way for me to explain it, because often you'll see someone in a situation where they need immediate placement, and now you have had no guidance, you have no understanding of how it works, and you're just basically plucking a community, out of nowhere without any understanding of whether or not it's the best place for your person.
So let me ask you this, where does somebody first typically come in contact with a senior advisor? What is happening in their life? Is it based off of an event, or is it an age, or where is kind of the starting place?
So for an individual, like a husband, wife, it would be probably dementia or cognitive dysfunction that has escalated, and that maybe now they're feeling like it might be time to be looking. An awful lot of people we work with are referred to us by social workers at various hospitals or rehabilitation facilities, where, the social worker realizes that they need to be looking into this and now has recommended that they pursue it. So we'll receive a referral, touch base with whoever the power of attorney is or whoever the decision maker is, and then go visit them even at the hospital or at the rehab facility, and then actually get, an idea of the patient notes and then match them to an appropriate community. You want to make sure that their needs are going to be met both socially and physically.
So is it always a senior advisor is typically getting involved at a time of crisis, like at a time of when there's like like you mentioned dementia,
Yeah.
or you find out from, the hospital that you basically can't go back home, like you need full-time care. Is that?
That is 90%. Because again, in this industry, we all know nobody, out of sight, out of mind on, planning for things that we don't want to think about. So I mean, I've joined groups like this, and, I've gone to other, groups trying to spread awareness that, whether or not you think about it or plan for it, it's probably going to happen. So you might as well get an idea and understanding when you don't have that emotional stress, of having an emergency.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, unfortunately, that's the majority of the referrals that we receive are people that are in need, whether it be immediate or, within a few months, just based on, like I said, their memory is deteriorating, or maybe their personality is changing, or maybe they've had an accident. I mean, an awful lot of people, break a hip or need hip surgery, and then maybe they're just not equipped to go home immediately. So that's
Mhm.
another thing that people don't realize is going to a community, it can be a month at a time. So even if, you just need a few months of safety, so you just need to make sure that people are looking after, it doesn't mean that you have to be in a community forever. So that is also an an option for people that may need something beyond what, say, Medicare will pay for PT or inpatient rehab.
Okay. So just to sum up, just what is a senior advisor is basically the senior advisors are professionals that are aware of all the options in the marketplace
Mhm.
for living arrangements for seniors, whether it's full-time or temporary, whether
Mhm.
it's long-term or temporary.
Yes.
And then so tell us now, what are the different types of living arrangements or opportunities that
Yeah.
seniors have? Because that's something personally myself, I've dove into this, and I've been really overwhelmed by how diversified it is. Can you break down kind of what are the main options that families have as
Mm.
far as types of living arrangements for
Mhm.
seniors?
Absolutely. Also, I wanted to mention, there's no cost to the families for what we do. We get
Okay.
compensated by a community, so we're a free service to them.
Okay.
So independent living, that's where we'll start. So, that would be, if you just don't want to do your housework anymore, you'd like your meals provided for you, you want to play the Wii and have a cocktail downstairs, and you want to be in a community that is with the same age range. You want to do activities, but you'd rather take a bus. I mean, you're just at that state where you'd like to be around people, you'd like more socialization. you'd like someone to do your housekeeping. So that's what's referred to as independent living. So you're going to get some perks, but you're on your own. You don't get any kind of medical care whatsoever. It's basically just a place for you to be socialized and, provided your meals.
Okay.
Um,
If I
as-
just may break down that for 1 second, what would be the difference of independent living versus like a retirement community?
so retirement community can be all in the same. You just have different levels of care. Independent being no medical care, but you basically have access to your 3 meals, you have housekeeping, and then you have all your social activities. And it's all, basically your cable's included, your electricity is included. So it's a way for you to combine all of your expenses if you want to and stop paying your property taxes, that kind of thing. Um, so you're basically living in an apartment just with, your own age group and with, things to do and people to play with.
That's a nice way to put it. And are all independent livings include meals, or is that
Excuse me, I have allergies. So meals usually are an additional expense. A lot of them will incorporate one, because they do have full kitchens. So that's a good point as well. So the design of the apartment is going to be different depending on, what kind of living space you're in. So independent's going to have a kitchen. It's just like an apartment. It just happens to specialize in, people that are retired and probably 65 and older, would be a general, age range for people that live there. It's just you've decided you don't want to mow the grass anymore. You guys want to, have plenty of things to do, and you'd like, a meal or two provided, or the access to a cafeteria space where you can purchase a meal. Take the shuttle to the Publix and the Walmart every week, and you basically continue living like you would. Just it's more inclusive and has more options for you to have other things done for you if you wish. Your hair, and I mean they have salons and putting greens, and you can bring your animals. So I mean, so that's the most free space as far as what you consider a retirement community, but it's definitely incorporated.
what are the it's not to be specific, but what are the price ranges on these? Maybe from like the cheapest to the most expensive. What is
So independent living isn't going to be covered by insurance or any of that because you're not getting any kind of skilled care. So this is basically just where you live. So having an all-inclusive independent living space, which I would consider nice. If you want like a 2 bedroom, you're going to be in the $6,000 a month range. If you're good with a one, anywhere between 4 and 5,500. And of course, it can go up depending on, if you'd like more amenities or if you'd like it to be a fancier place. I mean, some of them have ice cream parlors. I mean, you can go the whole gamut of amenities that are offered. So I would say reasonably anywhere between 5 and 7,000 for a nice independent living space.
okay?
Um, that's in contrast, obviously, as you go up the scale and have more skilled care, then that's when you start talking about different levels of care. So
And then
independent living being, hey, I want this apartment with fun people, but I still want to be in a retirement community. Then maybe you need some assistance. All right, maybe now you need a little bit of help dressing, or you need medication management. Or maybe you're just, you like a little bit more supervision. You can go into what's called assisted living. So independent living, you're independent and having a good time. Assisted, you're still having a good time. This is where you do have meals included. You may have a limited kitchen space. You may, need physical therapy, medication management. This is where, if you need assistance, dressing, bathing, the activities of daily living that we've all heard of. Any of those, if you need assistance, then that's when you're going to go into assisted living. All right. And you have a multitude of options as far as sizes of apartments. So you can start out with a studio. Some of them have companion suites, so you're living with somebody. You can go into a full 1 bedroom, a big 1 bedroom. Some communities have, 1 bedrooms with dens if you want an office space. So I mean, you still have, more of a normal living situation where you can kind of pick and choose what size apartment you want. And then, of course, depending on the community, You can have limited amenities or up to, going to wine tastings, and you have all the social activities in both independent and assisted. It just it just depends on, what community on what that will run you as far as cost.
So for the
Assisted living
assisted,
usually starts with a basic price for your apartment, and then you get a health assessment, and then they will add an extra, what's called level of care. So you start with a base, and then you have a level of care, which is determined by the community.
so is assisted living, or is there insurance involved in paying for that now, or
Yes. So as
okay.
soon as you get assistance in there, then yes, that's when you could use your long-term care insurance, or if you have another benefit for, that type of care, that then would cover that.
Um, so you would, because I hear a lot about people, I hear a lot of communities like Starling and different ones where they have the independent and they're also have connected and assisted living where
Yes.
people kind of just like transition over.
Yes.
Is that very common amongst where they have both, or is it a select amount?
Yes, and so all of them are licensed. Obviously, every community has to have a license, and depending on what type of license gives them the ability to have different types of community space. So you may have a community that is basically licensed to do assisted living and independent living, but maybe not necessarily skilled care. And I won't go too deep into that. But yes, it's very normal to see a community that offers a progression. And I think that's actually really healthy. I mean, particularly if you need assistance and then, in the future need memory, it certainly would be an easier process to commute from one side of a community to the other versus having to leave and go somewhere else. So yes, most communities do have options for different levels of care like that.
So assisted living, would that be, kind of like a final destination potentially?
So it just depends because, like I said, I've seen clients go in for things like respite, which just means the family needs a little bit of a break, or they may just need some additional physical therapy. Maybe they broke a hip. You can rehab and leave a community.
Mm,
It's not necessarily that this is, your final destination and you're going to then move to memory care and then, pass away. It just all depends on, what level of care you need and then how you improve.
mhm,
Um, I mean, I had a lady that was in hospice that actually got released. She got better.
mhm,
So I mean, of course, that's not the norm. Usually once you get into assisted living, if you need a certain amount of care, you probably will need care.
mhm. Right. Okay. What is the price ranges on assisted livings?
So assisted living, like I said, you're gonna pay a base price for your apartment. That's gonna be anywhere, I would say, between 3,500 and 4,500 is a good studio price. Of course, you can go up from there, and then of course there is assistance. If your financials don't, handle that, but that's a nice middle. And then from there, they're anywhere between 1 and 5 what's called levels of care. And that just means the nurse is gonna see what you actually need help with. Do you actually need help transferring? So, I mean, if every time you get up, someone has to come and help you up, that obviously is gonna add to the cost of your care. If you're just, need some basic med management, then you may be on a level 1, or you may be on no level and just with a small fee for med management. So it just depends. I have, people that pay their apartment price and then they pay $400 a month for their med management, and that's it, because they don't need anything else. There are people that go up to, level 3, or I've never seen a level 4. That's usually, that usually means memory or, something deeper. But depending on the community, that can be it can be anything. But I would say a standard cost for someone that needs a relative amount of assistance in assisted living that has a nice studio, you're probably looking at the 6,000-ish range, really, when you slice and dice it.
So
And
like
yeah,
about 3,500 for your apartment and then another 3 grand for your
and that's going to be a little bit on the higher end, and that those might be your more posh, communities. It just really depends. It really takes that assessment from your doctor and the nurse to really be able to, nail down what your level of care actually is. But I always like to be realistic with people. I'd like to go over and then maybe it's slightly under because I mean, let's face it, that's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather them be happier with me than than say, oh my gosh, it's $1,500 more.
Yeah, absolutely. What, so it's, well, now that we're into assisted living, so are you typically still responsible financially for your apartment, and then long-term care or other insurance products are able to cover the help, the medical help, or is it all inclusive?
So long-term care pays a daily benefit. It has to qualify. You have to be, you need 2 activities of daily living, in order to qualify for what's called long-term care. So as soon as you meet
That one
that
more time.
criteria,
Say that
yeah,
one more time.
you have to have limitations in 2 activities of daily living to activate a long-term care policy.
Right.
At
Well,
that
give us
point,
an
they're paying a
example.
daily benefit. So it
What
doesn't matter what it's for. It's basically going to the community towards your care. So
What
it's
would
not,
an
yeah,
example be? What would two activities that you can't manage? What would example?
showering and toileting,
Oh,
or, having someone help you eat. But yeah, the ones that we see the most obviously would be, toileting, and then
mm-hmm.
of course dressing, basic, hygienic things.
Okay.
Or if
Okay.
you need help getting into your wheelchair, that would be transferring. So I mean, anything that you do on a daily basis that you kind of don't even think about, if you
Mm,
need assistance with that, that's probably would qualify you for the long-term care.
okay. So now the long-term care is going to cover that medical assistance. Is it also going to cover your assisted living apartment?
So the long-term care is not for medical, so that would be your Medicare benefit, and then whatever secondary insurance you have to go with that would cover your medical. So Medicare is going to cover medical. The long-term care will help with your apartment expenses. It's not specific to one thing though, so it's not just paying for your apartment or just paying for care. It's just a straight daily benefit that you have bought that will then be paid to the community. And it's usually the words and the policies are usually up to. So if you don't need all of it, you don't have to use all of it. So say you have a $400 a day benefit and you only need 300. Well, they're just going to pay out the 300 times 30 days. So it'll be, it'll just go towards your anything but medical.
Okay. So, do you find in working with families, do you find that their long-term care package that they had set up, right? Because we spoke with Peachy from insurance, Peachy Insurance, and she was talking about how you should get long-term care, honestly, like in your 40s. And I'm like, is that my time?
Yeah.
Um, but she was just kidding, I'm 25. But then
You're going backwards, just like me.
but so do you find, because I thought about this, do you find that people have chosen the right policy to go into long-term care when it comes time to actually needing it? Or do they have the right daily limits and things like that?
So unfortunately, it wasn't something that people really recognized as a necessity until probably the last 10 or 15 years when they've actually seen the result of people actually using this benefit. That's why a lot of these companies have, started offering paid up benefits because of rate increases, anyway, so forth and so on. If they have planned for long-term care, what I do see it are good policies. The problem is an awful lot of people don't plan for it. So if I was saying anything about long-term care, if you're gonna go for it, make sure you get a comprehensive policy, not just one thing or the other. So some companies will offer you just a home health benefit. Well, I mean, that's great, but most people need both. So if you're gonna go ahead and make the investment, keep in mind rate increases. I mean, and it's great for us to plan in our 40s, but you got to think about affordability. if you're going to continue getting a standard industry rate increase for the next 40 years, and I mean, how old do you think we're going to be when we are actually in need of long-term care, in our generation? Is it going to be in our 80s, or are we going to be pushing more into our 90s, or maybe in our hundreds? So if you start paying on something in your 40s and you don't use it until you're in your 90s, you're going to experience a rate increase every year. So I mean, you got to look at affordability of that. So I
Mm,
mean, just like most things, our industry needs to take a hard look at, what a normal middle class person can do to truly plan for long-term care, which right now is 7 out of 10 people, which I mean that's 70% will need extended care beyond what Medicare will pay. And
mhm.
where does that money come from? And then also, the quality of care. I mean, we're starting to see it because this is the largest influx into the Medicare system through 2028, 2029. We'll see the true impact of long-term care really probably in the next decade because it's a very large generation. And if the statistics are correct and, we're extending life, well beyond what we used to, I mean, what's that going to look like? I mean, financially.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in long-term care insurance. I just, like I said, when you do the math and you look at, how many years we're talking about, is it really truly affordable the way that it's set up right this second?
Right. Let me ask you, just trying to go back a little bit because we got off on a tangent on the long-term care. Why would it be an option for families to stay in place in their homes, which I'm sure that's what probably most people would want in their hearts, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, would it make financial sense to stay in your home and just get the in-home care
It
versus
just depends on how much care we're talking about. So, I mean, my grandfather had 4 hours 3 times a week, and that was just, general washing dishes and, just doing things that he really couldn't do anymore. Versus, my aunt who had Alzheimer's had 24-hour care at home and it was 30 something thousand a month.
wow.
So, I mean, it just depends. I really think that's also what we can do as advisors is help guide people down a path to their own right decision,
Mm-hmm.
whether, as a collective, as a family, from a financial perspective, and also an emotional one, and then also just what makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it just really depends. I mean, home health is anywhere between, 25 and $30 an hour. Obviously, if you only need a little bit of that, that could definitely make sense. If you need 24-hour care though, that's, I mean, for most people, just not going to be accessible.
Right, because if we're talking about, someone needing assisted living, which means, they can't be on their own, and then you're going into a place where all the systems are already in place, all the care is already in
Right.
place, all the meals, everything's already in place.
Mhm.
Someone, well, we haven't gotten into memory care yet, but let's just say someone that needs help with just all the daily things, like you said, it was level one, two, and three. Four would
Usually, yeah.
yeah, for four would kind of be already on memory care, like full time.
Or hospice. I
Yeah.
mean, just, yeah.
If you were at like a level three, let's just say, so you weren't very little, but you weren't the worst. You were kind of like right there. What would the cost be? Look, it doesn't have to be exact. I just want to get an idea of like living in an assisted living versus living at home and paying for home care. What price difference are we looking at?
So if you need a fair amount of care, which is what you're
Yeah.
alluding to, then you're definitely going to be financially better off going to an assisted living. I mean, if you have the finances and that's what you want to do, a lot of people kind of miss the social aspect of it, though. I mean, even though it sounds really nice to age at home, you're very isolated. I mean, maybe your son, daughter, granddaughter, maybe you get visitation, maybe you do go, here and there, but for the most part, you're sitting at home, watching TV or, assisted living also provides that social aspect, which I think, mental health is just as important as physical health.
Do
And
do
so, yeah, yeah.
do seniors realize that, or is that something that you see from just being on the outside looking in?
So no, because it's all entrenched in us that as soon as we go to the home, then, that's it. Life's over with. And it's not like that anymore. I mean, long time ago, was the nursing home that people consider in their brains, which is I'm basically going to lay in a bed and, whittle away. I mean, you have all the options for activities or no activities, but at least there's activity around you. I mean, that there's something to be said for that as well. Even people that are bedbound can hear the laughter and the people walking through the halls. It isn't isolated like it is to be at home. And again, I think the stigma is the idea of what it means, not what it really means in reality.
Mm-hmm.
Assisted living just means you need a little bit of help. It means congratulations, you've gotten to a certain age where, look at all the life you've lived, and now you need something different.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if you're in your heart, you want to stay at home, as long as it makes financial sense to you, I mean, that certainly is an option.
But
Um,
it would be considerably cheaper financially to get in an assisted living versus staying at home and getting the in-home care.
if you're on a level 2 or level 3, yes.
Okay.
I mean, it would need to be a case specific if you were not. It would just depend on how much care you actually needed.
Okay. Okay. Take us now to the next. We talked about independent, we talked about assisted.
Mhm.
Okay. What's after that?
Memory care.
Okay.
So, and again, the most communities are built to where you can segue. You can progress, or you can get better and maybe move to independent living from assisted living. I mean, that happens too. So memory care, obviously, when you're either a flight risk, so you're going to run away, that's definitely where you need a lot more security. So these are smaller spaces. Most communities have 20-ish beds, memory care wise. But you have a higher caretaker, ratio to people. You also, get looked in after more often than assisted living. So basically, you're upping your care level. So in contrast to assisted living, though, most memory care communities are all inclusive. So they're going to start you off at 7,000, 6,000, whatever it is, and that's going to include your care as well. So you're not going to have that assessment. You're essentially living in a community at an all-inclusive rate.
Is
And of
it
course,
is
hmm?
it is there a waiting list on these places? Because I'm just thinking if there's only 20 beds, I mean, how hard is it to get in these?
It depends on the time of year. I mean, of course, people don't want to place their loved person in a community during the holidays, so there's usually availability then. Um, right now, there is a waiting list in most places that I'm looking at for families. But in all reality, you will have some kind of space in most places within a 30-day period. So if you decide that this is my community, you basically put down the down payment, and then you have the first right of refusal from there. They'll call you when an apartment's ready, and you can say yay or nay. If you say nay, you drop to the bottom of the list, and they'll call you when you get back up to the top.
Okay.
But yes, right now I'm seeing memory care on a wait.
Is there enough memory care? I've been reading some articles and just seeing some stuff about just how on the rise like dementia and all those things are.
It
Is
is. I mean, it all has to do with medicine, the technology, the diagnostics. I mean, everything's getting more specific and tailored. Um, so there's more knowledge, there's more understanding of the differences between types of dementia and Alzheimer's, which is different than dementia.
Mhm.
Yes, but I mean, it all has to do with longevity too. I mean, things that used to make people, pass away, they're not passing away. They're continuing to live. So yeah, memory care is definitely becoming a bigger and bigger concern with as in the aging process.
Mhm.
Particularly for ladies, we seem to get dementia a little bit more often than men do. But I mean, it's neither here nor there. People say it's because we live longer. I don't know if it's, because we're ladies or because we're living longer, but you see much more ladies in memory care than you do gentlemen.
What does families have to really consider on the memory care side? Because I feel like, with independent living, you're making your decisions, you're making your choices.
Mhm.
Assisted living, you're also still competent, you're making your decisions. It's more social, like you said. But when you get into memory care, I mean, what does life even look like at that stage?
So this is where I look at what level they are as far as, how much their disease has progressed. There are specific memory care only communities that you may see people that are definitely at a much lower functioning level. So you don't want to take someone that's just starting their journey with dementia and put them in a community where everybody's sitting around just kind of staring. So what people really need to consider is the atmosphere. And they need to take themselves out of it. When you walk into memory care, it's for them. There are fidget blankets, there are activities, baby dolls. I mean, some people really enjoy folding laundry. To us, it seems depressing. To them, it's liberating. They can now do an activity that makes them feel better. They can now be around people that are like-minded and, having the same journey as they are. So that to me is the most important thing to look at in memory care. Obviously, you want their staff to be employed, not rented. And then the second is the actual atmosphere. Is my loved one on a similar level to the other people living here? You want, because I mean, I had a lady walk up to me yesterday that told me her exact diagnosis. I mean, she definitely had a lot still going on, but she definitely had enough moments to where she needed to be safe and she needed to be in memory care. So you certainly wouldn't want her, in a place where nobody speaks anymore, or, where there's limited interaction, because unfortunately that's what happens with that disease as it progresses.
Hmm. So is memory care just kind of how we have it independent and then you can go to assisted living progressing, like is there
Mhm.
is just one facility memory care, or are you starting at one type of facility and transitioning to another?
Well, see, that's also the nice part. So say you're higher functioning and need memory care. If you're also in a community that has assisted living, you could do intermingling. So you may, your son or daughter or whomever can take you to the assisted living side for lunch. Or they do have, interactive activities like, piano players, or so that integration into assisted living and memory care, I mean, that can be very stimulating, versus a standalone memory care, maybe for people that have, you know, gone further into their disease and basically need safety, and, they need consistency. So, I mean, again, that's what we do, is we assess the situation, look at the personality, the needs, we look into the future because we certainly want it to be affordable, in the future. And then, narrow down, the hundreds of communities and options to ones that will actually work again socially and physically.
Okay. Is there another option after memory care, or is that kind of the three?
So those are going to be the three, but there is another one called skilled nursing.
Okay.
So a skilled nursing is basically if you get to a point where you can't transfer, and it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's just a good baseline. We all know, if someone can't actually physically move their body and get help to get into a chair, then that's what you're going to be. No community is going to be able to service that. You'll need to be in what's called skilled nursing. Another example would be someone that needs any kind of medical equipment, like to lift them out of the bed. So say, for instance, they can't transfer and they need to actually be lifted out of the bed with a machine. So communities aren't licensed to do that. Well, some of them do have skilled nursing perks, but those are all self-pay. They're like Brooks. Okay, so that would be the only other option community-wise, is if they didn't have, basically the gadgets and, the staffing and, you're talking about more skilled care and skilled nursing. So
Okay.
that's more medical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But also in assisted and memory care, you can age in place there, as far as they do offer, all of them do offer hospice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can pass there peacefully. You don't have to go somewhere else if you are admitted into hospice or palliative care even. I mean, palliative care is a great help to a lot of people that need assistance.
What is,
So yeah, I mean, assisted and memory care though would be a lot less medical. The skilled nursing is more like hospitalization. Okay.
okay. What is a pelvis care?
So that's so my great examples, I've been a hospice volunteer for 8 years. So my great examples are my peds kids. My kids that are actually they just, many of them were just born with very severe physical disabilities. Hospice will come in and it is covered underneath most of them are on, the kids are on Medicaid, but it's all covered underneath their insurance. It's just an additional layer of rehab. So it just means that in the future, what's going on with your body is you're probably going to pass. But right now, we're just going to make sure to make the best out of it and add an extra level of service on top of your medical.
Okay, so that would be on top of wherever you would be at, whether you're at an assisted living or you're at a memory care.
Yes, and that would be medical. So that's not going to be anything that you need long-term care insurance for. Those types of things, hospice and palliative care are included in Medicare, or if you happen to be on a child on Medicaid. So that's a medical service. But all of these communities will allow for you to have your hospice, have your palliative care, and pass peacefully within the community. Should
Okay,
that be what's going on?
okay. Talk with us a little bit about what are some of the things that you see in, sitting at the kitchen table with families at this moment, when they've got to make these, hard decisions, right? Of getting the care. I know, from personal experience, my grandma had dementia.
Mhm.
And but it was kind of like wasn't all the time. So you were kind of like, is grandma okay? Or, and you started seeing her like put like things like in her drawers that made no sense. And then, so I think for the most part, probably families like to try to keep grandma at home, but then what do you see them kind of struggling with in those moments of like, because I think I would assume that people probably don't do it soon enough, like
Right.
than when they should have. Like what guidance could you give as far as,
Well, as hard as it is, and easy for me to say, is guilt. That is the biggest and worst possible scenario you can throw into this, because it is what it is. And nothing that you do is going to change what is happening. What you can do is make sure that your loved person doesn't get hurt along the way. So, I mean, if you wait too long, grandma, grandpa, whomever could end up on the floor for, that's what happened to my grandma. She ended up on the floor for 24 hours and with no help and no assistance. So you gotta just go with your gut instincts on your person. If you know something's wrong, you know something's wrong. If you've seen a progression in illness, don't ignore it. The reason for a community isn't, to make you a bad, granddaughter or a bad child. It's because you love them and because you have their best interests at heart, and you're going to be the sad one, not them. I have not one time seen a move where the person wasn't better off. What I
mm,
do see all the time is that the person that made the decision beats themselves to a pulp.
mhm.
So, I mean, I don't know the person, for more than, 5 or 6 hours. You know your person, when things have gotten to a point where it's a safety issue. And you know what? It's your love that is actually guiding you towards putting them somewhere where they're going to have socialization, medical assistance, and the opportunity to, be with like-minded or people in a similar situation. That helps so much psychologically.
Are you
Um,
are you mostly dealing with the family or are you mostly dealing with the individual?
so to your point earlier in this conversation, people tend to wait. And so we're all of a sudden, children or whoever happens to be power of attorneys flying down, driving down. I mean, all of a sudden we got to make all these decisions. We've got to generate, you know, the money to pay for care. Um, I mean, again, it's waiting and waiting and seeing a situation progressing. And then all of a sudden now we've got to make a decision. And, you know, that it's very hard for people to be able to process all of that, you know, short period of time. But yes, I mean, oftentimes I don't meet the actual client until we're doing our last tour, or
Mm,
sometimes I don't meet them till they move. It just
mhm.
depends on the situation.
So you're mostly dealing with the family, who's ever caring for them. You know,
Yes.
that's one, we only have 9 minutes and this has been so informative. So I definitely would love to do this again and kind of break down some of the more of the inner workings. Can you give us some tips on what does it look like to qualify for these places? Uh,
Okay. That's
what are,
actually a really good question, because it's assumed that if my loved person needs this, that someone will take them, and that's not necessarily true. So that's another reason not to do this. If you're seeing a progression with your loved person, it's a lot easier once they're there, should they digress, to keep them there than to get them into a community when they don't necessarily qualify. In memory care, that would be usually violence. Addictive personalities, if people have alcoholism or drug problems, it may take a hot minute to find a community that will take them. Um, but you won't necessarily qualify. I've had plenty of clients declined. We've had to go find somewhere that, you know, is like, okay, we're going to be able to meet, you know, so and so's needs, you know, based on, you know, a more complicated situation,
sure.
mainly with memory. So the actual
What about,
physical aspects, I mean, unless they just can't provide care, in which case you would go into the skilled nursing.
mhm.
Assisted living, as long as you can, they can, you know, your activities can be, you know, addressed, then you're going to be good to go. You can't have, you know, any of those issues though. I mean, you can't, if you go into assisted living and you have an alcohol problem, they're not gonna, they're gonna look through your medical records. They're gonna make sure that you're not a flight risk. Um,
What
so
about
yeah, I mean, you're not,
what
you're not guaranteed acceptance.
what about the financial component? Because I had a elderly friend of mine, and they had sold their house, and then they went and moved into an independent living, and they ended up hating it, and and then but she hadn't really did any, you know, financial planning like we talk about in this group, right?
Right.
But she basically, you know, had, you know, the money that she had in her bank account, and then she had, you know, what she got from her retirement, you know, it was like
Mhm.
2,500 a month or something. And then she had sold her house, her primary house, so then she had that money. And then it was the weirdest conversation to me. You're probably used to this, but to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is awkward. Is she was literally like estimating how many years she was gonna live. Okay. And then she was like dividing it up by the money that she had in the bank, you know? And I'm like, how does that part work? Like, how do you factor all that?
So, I mean, again, it's the rate increases. I mean, these are all things. And again, you know, like I mentioned, we look at, you know, a few years from now. I mean, we look at actuary tables, we look at their health conditions, and I actually, you know, do like a mathematical, you know, uh, I actually do the math in my head, you know, based on how long I think they're going to need it. Because you certainly don't want to get to that position where you're like, well, I got to die now. I mean, that's horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean,
Like, what if, God forbid, what if you did run out of money? Like, what happens?
so in that case, the state will come in and take care of you, and that's when it gets complicated. Because your community may or may not accept a voucher like that. I mean, the reality is if you run out of money, you're going to end up somewhere where the state's going to take care of you. It just is what it is. No moolah, you know, then you're going to have to go on state assistance. It's the reality of the situation.
Is it as bad as you think, or are these places decent?
So I mean, it will do, I guess is the best way I can state it. It's not, it doesn't have the amenities, it doesn't have the activities. I mean, it is a state-run, community. They will get fed, they will get
It's more like
stimulation.
a traditional nursing home
Yes,
environment.
that would, I don't
Oh,
know if anybody's ever maybe had someone go to rehab at like Taylor Homes or off Parental Road. There's a community called Taylor. That would be more of what you would be looking at if you did need to go into something that is state run. Not perfect, but you will get care and you will have a nice clean bed to sleep in. Nobody's gonna leave you in the corner. But they're not just gonna put you on the streets is my point. And some communities will allow for that transition. It just depends on how long you've lived there and what your actual situation is. But yeah, there is, if you do run out of money, there is state, Medicaid that will come in and you will go to a state-run community.
I just want to open it up to the group. I always like to give the opportunity to ask the guest questions. So we've been like really entrenched, so I didn't stop and offer that. But if there is anyone on the meeting right now that would like to ask Jennifer a question, just put your hand up and I'll bring you up to speak with her. So I would like to probably just wrap it up. We have few more minutes together. I'm really impressed, like I really didn't know the so complex of all the things to consider. And I think all the options that are out there, working with someone like yourself. I mean, all the communities. I can't, I'm just thinking of like if a loved one was flying down or coming into town and you've got to run around and figure all this out. What are you qualified for? What is the financials? How much is it going to pay? I mean, what an incredible service, having senior advisors. I'm really, really in awe, of this entire space. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? I mean, I know you said you get a lot of referrals from like social workers and things
Yes.
like that, but how can families, like if somebody's watching this right now and they're saying, wow, we're struggling at home with mom in this case, and what do you people just book a consultation with you and you kind of start from there? What does that process look like?
Yes, you can either go to the Silverlink website and request an appointment. Or I also, of course, you can just call my cell phone. And even if you just have general questions, again, these are the spaces that nobody finds themselves in, maybe once, maybe twice. So I mean, there's no way for you to navigate it without, somebody kind of guiding you down the rabbit hole, because that's really what it is.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, again, we work with, we'll work with your doctors, social workers, caregivers. I mean, we can get patient notes from the various hospitals. I mean, we can actually work with a community with patient notes, and we can make sure that this is going to be a good fit financially, physically, and emotionally. And hopefully, everybody ends up feeling good about the situation in the end, which
Yeah.
is my ultimate goal.
Yeah. Well, if I have any families that are in this situation, I'm definitely going to recommend it because I mean, what a resource, it's very similar like in my space in probate real estate, you only go through it maybe once or twice a lifetime. You
Right,
have no concept of anything of what could happen, what it lays out there, the potholes that lay for you, the options that you have. And so a lot of people don't even know that they even need the help, right?
right,
Because they've never done it before you. And then what ends up happening is they just like keep walking down the river, and it can be mistake after mistake after mistake. And these are the kind of mistakes that you don't want to play around with,
right,
you don't want to get that woman that I was working with, she was making her own decisions, so she was, said, I'm going to be moving into an independent living. I want to sell my house, right? She's making all her own decisions,
mhm,
but she didn't like the decisions that she made. She got
right,
into the independent living and she she didn't like it. And then she ended up telling me that she wanted me to find her a condo. She moved out of the independent living, bought herself a condo, and that's where she's at, you know? But she may be someone I could recommend to at least have a conversation with you, you know, because if you're a person that has no family, you have like no husband, no wife, no kids, like, I mean, don't you kind of need this? Don't you need some plan in place?
I think everybody should sit down with someone like me and figure out exactly what they like, what they don't like, figure out how to budget for it, whether it's with insurance, or whether it's just, this is what I'm gonna dedicate in retirement towards, towards extended care, should I need it. Everybody needs a snapshot of this. Everybody needs to go visit communities and get the fear factor out of it. Everybody needs to ask questions. I mean, this is going to be another delicate part of life, just like being just like being a child almost. Now you're progressing into being an older adult, and all these things are happening to you, whether it's your health or, changes in your family structure. Maybe you've lost your spouse. You don't have to navigate it alone. And I mean, everybody needs an idea of what a community is going to look like for them.
yeah.
Whether or not they want something big, small, if you want something with lots of activities, if you want with lots of residents, if you want something tiny, definitely explore it and actually look at it with open eyes, because like I said, 70% of people.
We'll end up
So
eating
if
it.
it's not going to happen to me, well, that's 3 of you out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. Jenifer, thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing interview. Thank you for contributing to the mastermind. This was incredible. And we'll be providing this available for everybody to watch it, get connected with you. And again, thank you so much for being a valuable asset.
Oh, I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you. I'll see you guys. May 1st is the next meeting. Bye.
Bye.